What's up, y'all? Goofy Rexy here, and hope everybody is doing well. And wanted to make a video and talk about the Apocalypse event. So we did get this blog post yesterday that gave us some juicy information in regards to how we're going to ultimately be able to unlock Apocalypse. And I wanted to sort of give my take on this here. Sort of had a moment to digest the information and wanted to talk about some of the good things that are here. I think some concerns that I'm hearing from the community and that I also have as well, but then ultimately how to prepare for essentially this next chapter that is going to be Marvel Strike Force here. So a quick TLDR on this information though, just to kind of go through this. So they're going to be introducing this new game mode, and it's going to be called Sagas. Now, Sagas are going to be related to the legendary Horseman. The Sagas are going to appear after the second run Scourge event for that specific legendary. So, for example, when Morgan Le Fay's Scourge event has come around for a second time, that is when you will see the Saga event for Morgan Le Fay, or after that is when you'll be able to see the Saga event for Morgan Le Fay. Now, each one of these individual sagas are going to have their specific requirements that are going to be there. As we can see right now, they've kind of listed out some of these requirements. So you have your Pestilence saga, which is gonna have Morgan Le Fay, all 4 Darkhold characters you'll have to use. Same for Famine, you're gonna have to have Rogue and all 4 of the Unlimited X-Men characters. And then there's going to be some additional difficulties here, or requirements here, where for there's going to be different difficulties. Difficulty 1, 2, and 3 are going to have their required gear tier levels. So 13, 15, and then 17 for the respective difficulties. And ultimately, you're going to have to complete all 5 of these sagas in order to ultimately be able to get Apocalypse, recruit Apocalypse, unlock Apocalypse, and use Apocalypse here in Marvel Strike Force. There are going to be these additional rewards that you'll get as well. So some they mentioned here: orange gear, gold, armory 16 ore fragments, and ISO A blue materials. You're also going to be able to unlock Unawakened abilities. Those are additional additive abilities that will be added to each individual legendary horseman through those sagas. For instance, for your time warp ability for Morgan Le Fay, which is an Awakened ability will get it to level 8, which will give it a boost to where it will now be able to apply speed up for 2 turns and immunity to Apocalypse and all the other horseman allies. And then for Fay Queen, her passive, she'll be able to now do the 50% health to Apocalypse on all horseman allies, and also the resistance as well. There's also a costume, I think, that they mentioned for each individual legendary horseman that you will be able to unlock while going through the individual sagas. The important information here is that you will need to complete all sagas on all difficulties in order to be able to unlock Apocalypse. So that is obviously very important information that you are going to have to sort of pay attention to here as we move forward. But yeah, very interesting. These sagas are also going to be permanent sagas. So permanently in the game after the second run of each Scourge event. So you're gonna be able to find it here in the game. That's gonna be a new section in the Epic campaign, so you'll be able to access the saga. And they're also gonna put Dark Dimension here as well, and probably Pocket Dimension. That's where that's gonna be housed now as we move forward. So a lot of information here, and let's talk about some of the good things that I think that come from this. So I will say that I do think that this is slightly exciting, right? I want to say that I think, apart from some of the other things I want to discuss here that are concerns, this is actually kind of exciting, right? We're kind of going on this journey where we are, this like a nice little storyline that is sort of kind of cool, right? Like you're unlocking these different legendary horsemen. These legendary horsemen are now getting these awakened abilities that kind of boost their skills a little bit, or at least gives them some synergy with other horseman characters. And then you're able to sort of kind of like you're seeing that transformation as you kind of go throughout your roster. So it's kind of exciting from that perspective. It's also exciting that they're kind of moving away from this new sort of, I'm assuming this is going to be taking over Dark Dimension 6, right? So we're not going to be going through the traditional DD6 and G17, which is something we're going to talk about as well. We're not going to be going through all of that, right? And that's going to be I think that's actually kind of cool that they're doing that. A different way to be able to unlock this new big bad, right? So instead of Dormammu and Doom and Ultron that we've seen in the past, now we're getting sort of like this new unique way of going through Dark Dimension 6 in order for you, or I'm assuming this is going to be the new replacement for Dark Dimension 6 for you being able to unlock Apocalypse. I think that that's kind of cool. I do want to say too that I like that the sagas are permanent, that it's something that you're going to be able to go after attacking every single, at your leisure, right? As long as you get the characters to the right gear tier levels, as long as of course you're using the right characters, that you're going to be able to go about doing this. I do like that they are permanent and that we don't have to wait XYZ months for them to come back. The one thing we do have to wait for, of course, is for the Scourge events to run back for a second time, but I do like that these are kind of just going to be housed in the game, and you can kind of just go about doing it at your leisure when you want to. I also do like the fact too that this kind of gives us something to work towards, as opposed to being able to just complete this thing right out of the gate. One of the things that I do like about the Legendary Scourge events is that you're kind of able to go after getting as many high stars as you want to, depending on how hard you're willing to grind. But then kind of once you complete it, that you can use them on that team. But I do think that kind of stretching things out a little bit here with Apocalypse, of course, him being the leader of the Horsemen, I do think that this is actually, it's okay, sort of, kind of, that there is something to work towards, and that we're not going to be able to get this immediately right out of the gate, that there are some steps that we're going to be going towards, but there definitely is an asterisk to that, which we're going to talk about sort of kind of right now, right? Where I will say this, like, some of the concerns that I have in regards to this definitely got to be with the requirements, right? So you have to build out each individual Legendary Horseman team, which we kind of already knew about already. But then you also have these difficulty requirements as well, right? So you have difficulty 1, which requires gear tier 13, difficulty 2, which requires gear tier 15, and then there's difficulty 3, where you're like, oh man, that's G17 gear. Like, that gear is not even in Marvel Strike Force as of yet. So this kind of points back to the point where I'm like, okay, well, this is probably definitely replacing, right, the Dark Dimension 6, although I don't know how we're going to be getting G17 gear. So there's a lot of question mark there. Maybe they are bringing in a Dark Dimension 6, and that's how you're going to be able to get the gear, and it's just going to be primarily gear like how they did with Dark Dimension 3. That might be what they're doing. But yeah, it's very interesting because I'm not confident. They've taken so long to sort of like slowly leak out G16 that now I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to slowly leak out G17? This seems like a very, very long time for a lot of players before they're going to be able to realistically get to Apocalypse, because at each saga, you're going to have to get the Legendary Horseman team and the Legendary Horseman to gear tier 17 in order to be able to get through it. And they also mentioned this right here as well, that they're going to be adding there's going to be an addition for the Apocalypse saga, all 4 horsemen, their respective teams, and then several additional characters. We don't know who those additional characters are, so there is definitely a concern here that with G17 not being in the game yet, how long is this really going to take? This is not necessarily this year, probably, right? You're probably looking at next year, which I think is fine, the timing of it, but it's also more of how are they going to sort of distribute that gear. Also, I think some players do feel kind of bad about the fact that they don't really have that much agency on their roster anymore, because essentially you're going to just be working on these Legendary Horseman teams, these teams that you'll need for Scourge events. I mean, Jesus, it's just like you don't really have much flexibility to work on anything else. It's really just all focused down on this. So maybe right now, like for Dark Dimension 5, the recommendation might be hold off until you get all those Legendary Horsemen. Use those Legendary Horsemen and bring them up to G16, and even like for even previous Dark Dimensions, like maybe that's the direction that you go in, because everything is going to be tied towards this Apocalypse saga, and it just makes sense to put the gear on those characters instead of trying to put it on Shuri and, you know, Omega Red even, right? Like, it may make sense to just kind of hold off and put that gear on those characters. And also some players feel bad that they're going to have to put it on Scarlet Witch, and Phantom X and Scarlet Witch are going to have to go to G17, and guarantee there's going to be one character on the War Horseman team and on the Death Horseman team where you're going to be like, bro, I don't want to have to put G17 on these characters. So that is definitely is a thing that I've heard as a concern for some of these players right now. Apart from just the G17 gear, there's a little bit of a concern too, I think, for me, in regards to just like other bottlenecks that are already in the game. So there's G16, G17 they mentioned is going to be next patch. They mentioned this in this blog. Well, what are you going to do about G14 and G15 is kind of okay, But what about G14 and then Orange Catalyst, right? So for me, I'm like, all right, well, okay, like I'm happy for the new gear, but there's still previous bottlenecks that have not been addressed and have not been alleviated, in my opinion. So for like, I know right now, last night I was on stream and I was kind of talking to a couple players, and I'm like, man, my health catalysts are kind of just not that great right now. I just got back to over 1,000. But you know, previously it's been like last week, I think I had been like 700, and I was worried, and I basically slowed down the progression of my roster to make sure that I could just accumulate that. And the events do help out to be able to get some of those catalyst pieces too. So don't get me wrong, the events actually do contribute to sort of you not being in that much of a deficit, but there's definitely a big, massive gear crunch right now with a lot of the catalysts that are in the game. And so for me personally, I'm like, you got to address that issue. Like if G16 and G17 are going to be so challenging to get to, we're looking at this massively long time frame, then players need to be able to gain quicker access or more, or there needs to be an abundance given in terms of G14s and G15s, because now you're going to have to build out these full teams in order to be able to compete in the Scourge events, in order to be able to get through these sagas, right? Because you're going to need additional characters too. And some of those additional characters may be new characters, we don't know. We need that gear available to us so that we can go ahead and invest into our roster. So that for me is definitely a concern as well. There is something was mentioned here in regards to blue ISOs, and there being, I don't think this is a requirement, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but somebody was concerned about the blue ISO 5, and of course the blue ISO 5s, I think you're only going to be able to gain access to that, I believe, through Doom 3. No, this is going to be through the sagas, but of course there's going to be Doom 3. There's just some concerns about all these pieces of materials that you're going to need in order to be able to compete and get through a thing. So there's definitely some concerns where that is also. I'm also going to say that I kind of don't like the idea of the carrot being dangled a little bit, right? So here at the beginning of the year, we were like, okay, well, they're introducing these Scourge events. They're getting rid of these star requirements. Okay, well, if you're getting rid of the star requirements, what does that mean? Like, what stars are we going to be able to unlock Morgan at first, right? And it was mentioned, okay, you're going to be able to get a 5-star, a 3-star, you can get a 3-star Morgan unlock. So that was exciting for a lot of players who probably previously before would never have had that opportunity. And even for players who are now able to get 6-star legendary characters on first run, 7-star legendary characters on first run, that was also an exciting thing as well. But now for those players who have unlocked those legendary horsemen at 3 stars, 4 stars, they probably most likely have no chance at being able to get Apocalypse anytime soon, right? And that kind of is a feel bad, I think, a little bit here, because they will potentially have these other 4 horsemen, but they may not be able to get Apocalypse for, could be years, or, well, I don't want to be dramatic, but you kind of get the point that I'm talking about here. And that, I think, is just going to be a feel bad if you're not going to be able to get to that thing, especially if that thing runs out of the meta or whatever. Although Doom is still in the meta, right? I think that's going to be fine. I think they've learned from Ultron not to kind of do that, but that definitely is something of a concern too. And there probably some more concern that you guys do have, but let's talk about how to prepare for this moment and how to be sort of ready for this when it happens. So the reality is that, like, Apocalypse is still a while away, right? Like, we're most likely, this is not going to be happening this year. This is going to be sort of one of those things where you're kind of just going to be building up towards it, right? I think if we're looking at the timeline, each legendary Horseman Scourge event has to run twice, and then you have the saga, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, well, Morgan has to come back, and then we just had the Rogue that literally just ended. She has to come back, and then we have to get the new one for War, and then we have that one has to come back, and then Death, and then that one has to come back, right? So realistically, there's a lot of time in between when that, like, Apocalypse even shows up as being, I don't think it's this year. I definitely think it's probably going to be sometime next year, maybe mid next year for all we know. That's kind of when I'm thinking that those things are going to happen. I think what you have to be mindful of now is, okay, I am only going to level up for the rest of the time being, which kind of sucks, but it's just the reality of it. Your Scourge teams, like, upgrade the teams that you need for Scourge, like your main teams that you need for Scourge in order to be able to get your Horseman teams. I will also say too, I would probably prioritize G16 gear on your legendary Horseman characters. Yes, Dark Dimension 5 may suck, but in my opinion, why the F would you invest into other characters? Well, yes, there's always going to be some characters that are worth still invested into, right? Icarus, Cersei, right? There's always going to be those characters, your raid characters, right? But I would say this, like prioritizing your Scourge, your legendary Horseman teams, and even for your Scourge teams, I would probably say maybe leaving those characters at G15, and also your main team, bring them to G15. Your secondary teams, it might make sense just to leave them at gear tier 12 until they figure out what the hell they're doing, right? With the G14 bottleneck, the orange catalyst bottleneck, until they figure out what's going on there. I would say it may even be wise, because you could, if you're an endgame player, you could probably get a 5-star legendary Horseman without needing to invest into the secondary Scourge team. I've definitely learned that with A-Force. I didn't really use them. I got a 5-star Rogue. Same thing with Dark Hunters. At the time, they were only at gear tier 12. I've boosted them since, but at the time, I only invested into Web Warriors, and they were able to get me a 5-star Morgan Le Fay. So maybe that's the way that you kind of got to go about it. Like secondary Scourge team, gear tier 12, until they figure out G14 and G15, and then focus mainly on building up your main Scourge team, and of course using some of the other teams that you use for other game modes. Probably prioritizing and only bringing them up to G15, and hopefully what I can say is it's gonna be tough, right? Because raids, you need Doom raid characters, and if you're gonna be doing Doom 3, which you're gonna need to do for ISO Blue 4, because you're gonna need ISO Blue 4 before you get to ISO Blue 5, there may be some sacrifices that you make there, but just overall philosophy, I think, would be a good direction to go in. Cosmic Crucible, guaranteed, is gonna be a place where G17 gear is gonna be. Can't ignore Cosmic Crucible if you have been doing it. I would suggest that you do not. Pay attention to the teams that are doing well there. Don't over invest. Don't put G16 on any of those characters, but do pay attention to the comps that are working there to make sure that you're able to be successful, because you're going to need those credits in order to be able to purchase G17 gear that I guarantee is probably going to be going to that Cosmic Crucible store. So these are my thoughts, guys. I didn't think this video was going to go this long, but it did. Here we are today as a people. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. There's so much more I can unpack and cover here, but I don't want to take forever doing this. So what are your thoughts? How do you feel? What are your concerns? What are things that you think are good? What things potentially you think are bad here? How are you going to prepare for this moving forward? But until next time, guys, I should say, like, your arena teams too. Don't prioritize the arena teams. Don't not do that, right? But just make sure that the main focus is on your Scourge teams and your legendary Horseman teams. All right, I'm done. I'm out, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you know when the videos do go live. Check out the links that are down below in the description, the Discords, all that stuff, guys. Until next time, guys, y'all be blessed. Y'all be safe.